my swing ain't a goddamn thing changed.
I'm not gonna lip wrestle with you niggas, but if any of you clowns cross me or my family, bad news, gonna beat you home.
In hip hop, sometimes you have to speak a special language to those that don't understand a certain language.
Prince is a very complicated man who was motivated by life in 1986 to leave the routine 9-to-5. The laid-off bank worker no longer wanted to work for anyone, and he had a simple goal.
Watching my mother work hard, as a waitress and bring me her tips. And, with us living in the projects at the time, her only wish was to have a home.
It prompted Prince to pursue a career path where his goal was to work for himself and simply buy his mother that house. He did that 29 years ago by building Rap-A-Lot.
Conspiracy, a noun, an agreement by two or more persons to commit a crime, fraud, or other wrongful act. When my friend Frank ran away from home at 11 years old, my grandmother let him come stay with us. Although we didn't have much, my grandmother believed that no one, especially a child, should go without. By then, I had several viable hustles going. My lawn mowing business was growing by leaps and bounds. At $5 per yard, I was able to outsource most of the work to my friends, making sure they got a cut of the take-home pay. My neighbors, M.R. Rudy and M.R. Brown, had taught me how to fix engines, so I handled the lawnmower maintenance myself. My family always encouraged my work ethic, so I started a side job on the weekends working with a welder, Henry Martin, who was dating my mother. Frank had helped with one of my early entrepreneurial ventures. When I was about 9 years old, Frank and I went hunting near my older cousin's house. We came across this horse, a Shetland pony, and I thought it was lost. I didn't realize that we were on somebody's property, so I kind of felt like the horse was a free horse. Me and Frank ran this horse down, and we finally caught him 3 or 4 miles away. We walked the horse back to my cousin's. My objective was to bring the pony home and make money off it the same way I'd seen the carnival making money off ponies. So I called my mother, and she put my stepfather, Henry Martin, on the phone. I told him I wanted to bring the horse home. He told me, "Boy, you ain't found no horse. Leave that horse where you discovered him." I didn't listen to him. I convinced my cousin to help me load the horse into the back of his van and gave him like $7 for gas to drive the horse back to the 5th Ward. So I brought this horse to the city, and I was charging 25 cents for pony rides. I just put people on the horse and walk them around the house. I made a few dollars, and I had a little line of kids waiting. But it wasn't long before my stepfather, green welding truck, pulled up. He put a real good whipping on me that night with his bare hands. That was my first and only whipping he gave me. Anyway, if Frank was going to live with us, he'd have to work too. But unlike my other friends, Frank had already identified his talent. Frank was a natural, born thief. He loved to steal. He couldn't help himself. It didn't matter what it was. He just loved the thrill of stealing, and he was unhappy when he didn't have the opportunity to steal. For me, this posed a challenge. I wasn't big on stealing. I wasn't afraid to roll my sleeves up and get down to hard work, but I did have a problem with passing up an opportunity, and Frank was an opportunity. Every morning, my grandmother would see Frank and I off to school, but Frank would never make it to class. As much as he loved stealing, he hated school, so he'd skip it. Frank is a follower, and his vulnerability rang true. He wanted my acceptance. That's the obvious reason he came to live with me after running away from his own family. He wanted to make me happy, and I wanted to put Frank to good use. So every morning, since Frank was going to skip school anyway, I gave him an assignment. His challenge every day was to steal something different, maybe some chickens or an edger with a motor on it for my mini bikes. No assignment was too big or too small. Frank never shied away from the challenge. He lived for it. Frank was a kleptomaniac as a leader. I was recognizing Frank's passion and using it to benefit everyone. This went on for a few years. The assignments got more challenging, and Frank got better at completing them. My grandmother had no idea that Frank was my own personal booster. Looking back on it now, it was incredible. The things he was able to steal. This was truly his gift and his curse. We were in the 8th grade when the curse kicked in. On this particular morning, Frank's assignment was to get a rooster that I wanted. Back then, in 1977, we had rooster fights. It was a very physically aggressive time. Now, I just collect roosters. They're beautiful creatures that I enjoy watching and listening to as they crow in the background. But back then, there was one rooster in particular I'd seen, and I knew he needed to be my fighter. A few hours later, I was in class when Principal Ross summoned me to his office. Frank had been boosting for us for years and had never gotten caught, so he was the last thing on my mind as I walked down the hall. Principal Ross' reputation was hard-earned. Although he was only the assistant principal, everyone knew that he didn't play. "Son, you know Frankie asked."
Prince, who has had his share of high-profile controversies like a federal investigation in the 90s with no charges or the civil lawsuit for assault against him that he won, wanted to make it clear you don't touch his family.
If you don't stand up for yourself and stand up for those around you, then people will take that to mean that there's a weakness.
As I walked into his office, I told him, "Yes, well, Frank didn't make it to school today." He said, to which I replied, "Well, I'm here. I've been here all day." But that wasn't his point. "Your grandmother says that you got Frank skipping school." Principal Ross said, "My heart skipped a beat when I realized my grandmother was giving me up. You see, while I feared no man, I definitely feared my grandmother, and now I knew that she knew something was up." "My grandmother?" I asked. "Yes, she wants to speak with you," he said as he handed me the phone. I wouldn't call the exchange between my grandmother and I a conversation. She'd been told from someone else that it was my fault Frank was skipping school, and I was starting to understand what had happened. The truancy officer had picked up Frank. It wasn't the stealing that got him in trouble. It was what he was neglecting while doing his dirt. Like many other criminals, Frank had overlooked one important fact. It's not the extra that draws attention. It's the failure to maintain the normal that usually gets you caught. Principal Ross took the phone from me and assured my grandmother he'd handle it. You see, Principal Ross had no idea Frank was stealing from me. In his eyes, the big offense here was that Frank was not in class every day. As far as he and my grandmother were concerned, this was my fault. Everyone knew that if I told Frank to jump, his response would be, "How high?" "Do you know what conspiracy means, son?" Mr. Ross asked me as he stood up and came around his desk. I'd heard the word before, but I didn't know what it meant. Today, anyone who's ever dealt with the law knows what the word conspiracy means because it's at the center of the RICO law. In 1970, Congress passed the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations, RICO Act, which was aimed at the mafia. It was an effort to establish severe consequences for people who belong to criminal organizations, which are responsible for crimes such as murder, kidnapping, extortion, witness tampering, robbery, arson, or even financial crimes such as money laundering, wire fraud, and counterfeiting. Eventually, the RICO law grew as a way of targeting drug crimes. The RICO law allows the federal government to prosecute someone for simply knowing of a crime or being in the presence of a crime, even if they didn't commit it themselves. It's a federal bully tactic which has brought down just as many innocent people as guilty. Decades after my meeting with Mr. Ross, as I went to war against the United States government to fight this very accusation of being a conspirator, I think back to that day Frank got caught skipping class. Being a leader isn't only about providing for your flock. There's a responsibility that comes with having a following. That's why it's important to pick the right following. Because if a sheep does the wrong thing as the shepherd, you too will be punished as Mr. Ross rounded his desk. He picked up his paddle and explained that conspiracy meant that while I didn't actually commit the offense, I was guilty by association. It didn't matter that I had an excellent attendance record or that I was getting good grades. That was expected of me. But it was also expected of Frank, who was under my influence. So at that point, I had to pay the price for getting caught up in a conspiracy. That price was Mr. Ross spelling conspiracy on my ass with that paddle. And I never forgot it. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Give him back what was taken from him. And, they made that happen.
The soft-spoken rap mogul has a reputation that precedes him. With some, it's unbelievable respect. Others, it's admiration for his charity efforts in the community, like after-school programs and free food giveaways at the Prince Boxing Complex. And for some, to be frankly honest, it's just downright fear of the man.
I don't desire to be feared. I desire to be loved if that's possible. But most of all, I just want to be respected, and I don't want nobody to fear me. I'm a lovable person,